Welcome to the Totally Honest Cooking Show. I'm Mark. Today we're cooking a bone-in ribeye. We're going to start by coating it very generously with kosher salt. I like coarse salt for this, just because I do. Now once you've coated it on all sides, you're going to let it sit for at least an hour. We're going to let it sit for an hour. You can let it sit overnight or for a couple days. You know, the point is just to get the salt in there and let it permeate the meat. I actually waited till the next day and we're ready to make a compound butter to go with the steak. Take the steak out, let it come to room temperature, and then crush yourself a clove of garlic. I would normally use 2, but this clove of garlic is huge. Look at it. Yes, look at it. Anyway, drop it into your food processor. You could also probably mince it and work it together with the butter, but we're just gonna do it quickly in a food processor. I've got some thyme that I've plucked and some rosemary. It's probably a couple tablespoons if I were to measure it. I'm not measuring it though. Just being lazy. And then trying to figure out how to use this every time with this thing. Hold on. Jerkins cut all of this. There we go. Okay, then give it a pulse. Just gonna turn it on, let it grind. I don't like mincing herbs, and this is easier. Scrape down the walls. Add in a stick of butter. Now, I cut this down because I feel like it'll make it easier to incorporate and also easier to bring to room temperature. Now, if you're bothering with this sort of thing, you should probably use a good butter. So, buy yourself one of the more expensive butters. Don't just use the grocery store brand butter for this. And to that, because we're using unsalted butter, we're going to add about 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now our butter will be salted. And hit it. Now, you will find that the butter will incorporate very quickly. See? It incorporated. So I'm going to put down a sheet of plastic wrap. Then we're going to put our butter down on our plastic wrap. You're going to scrape everything off as best you can. You're not going to get it all, but that's okay. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Now we're going to shape our butter. And you can shape it into whatever you want. Usually you don't go with a giant ball though. You're going to go with some sort of puck or puck adjacent sort of thing. I don't know. Pretend you're Canadian. And if you're Canadian, pretend you're an American pretending you're a Canadian. Okay, there we go. Herb butter. We're going to stick this in the fridge, let it firm back up a little bit while our steak comes up to room temp. Next, I put a probe in the side of my steak and we're going to put it in a 250-degree oven until it hits 115 degrees. Now, normally I get a 2 or 3 inch ribeye when I'm doing this. To be honest with you, this method is usually used for thicker steaks, but I really like this method, and so I'm doing it. This is how I make most of my steaks. This one's about close to 1.5 inches, so it's pretty anemic by my standards. You want it like here or even here, but what can you do? Okay, let's do it. The steak's about to come out of the oven and it's time to heat the cast iron. So I'm heating the cast iron over high heat. I'm getting ready to drop some butter in. The goal here is going to be to get it super hot so that we can start smoking. Melt our butter on our skillet. So we pull the steak out. There she is, looking kind of gray. We're just going to drop her straight onto the cast iron. You want it hot so you hear that sound of that butter That's how you know you're getting a good crust on the other side. Nice and hot. Now I've got a couple sprigs of rosemary and some thyme. Another big thing of garlic I broke up. And we're gonna add that to the party in just a second. But we're just gonna let that go until we get a lot of good color on the other side. Give it a little flip when you've got some color to it. Drop down some more butter and our garlic and our herbs. And we're going to start butter basting. Is this a gratuitous amount of butter? Of course it is. But it's the new year. And I want to have a good start to what I hope to be a good year. Give the little tiny fat cap on this thing some attention. And in no time at all, she's ready to go and take a little rest. You're going to give her about 10 minutes and then you're going to wake her up. But we do have our puck of butter. So what I'm going to do instead, before I let it rest for 10 minutes, is give myself a generous dollop of my herb butter. Just stick it on there. Now, is that more butter than is necessary? You're darn right it is. Normally I would tent this with aluminum foil, but I made a steak for my dad for Christmas last week, and I think I left the remaining aluminum foil from that over at their house. So I'm gonna put parchment paper over it and hope that that's enough to give it a little melty melt. Short time later and we're ready to carve. This one doesn't have much of a bone on it, but we can still go down the bone, up the meat, that if we did it right, you'll get this beautiful color. I don't know if you can see that from this angle. Let me get in close. Now that's what I call a New Year's steak. Look at that. Nice and juicy. Good color. I'm having it with some of this leftover casserole. That should have been last week's episode. Have a happy new year from my family to yours. Like, subscribe, click that little bell, and I'll see you next week. Bye.